Okay, I want to get your take since you mentioned TIFs. I can't, as a well, I'm in DC now, but I was a taxpayer. I still own a condo in Chicago. My wife. I've never understood the financial or the economic how TIFs don't affect the economic stability of the city. But TIFs, I don't understand. Like for me, any real economic justice that's going to bring about real economic justice in the south and west sides of the city
Right.
have to deal with TIFs. I remember
Yes.
David Orr, his last report was he published in 2018, said the city collected $660 million in TIFs. Now that number has gone up.
It's
since then.
926 million
Right,
this last year.
Right. It's like, wait a minute. How like where are you, city council, to keep letting that slush fund
Right.
exist? So I just wanted to get your feelings on a little more on TIFs.
Well, let me just tell you, the TIF, in theory, TIFs are designed to, you go into a blighted area, you in effect lay out a plan to develop that area, and then you go out and borrow, and the money that comes from tax revenue being generated from that blighted area that was not generated before can finance the investments that are going to be made to make the area to address the issue of blight. That's what it's supposed to be done. That's the way it's supposed to work theoretically, but that's not the way it works. Few blighted areas really experience any real development because you don't see the investment. What they've done is they've carved TIFs out of the South Loop, the North Loop, the Lincoln Yards TIF. I mean, in some cases, they've created TIFs in areas that in some of the few areas in the city that have been experienced, increases in property values and thus increases in tax revenue. So what they're doing is and by doing that, what they're doing is they're diverting that money. They're diverting that money off the top. When they create a tax increment financing district and and that district is already generating increasing property taxes every year, and they take that money away, your taxes actually go up. So when they say they're diverting $926 million in TIFs, what they've in fact done is raise your property taxes a like amount because local governments get what they levy. In other words, the local governments, if the city wants to increase its property tax levy by 5%, they get that net of TIFs. So the more revenue growth money you take away, the higher your property tax go, because you're not only paying for the schools and the cities' annual increases in your property tax levy, you're also paying for the diversion of the monies that are going to the TIF fund. And that $926 million last year is like a slush fund. The mayor has almost total control on how that money is spent and allocated. And there was a study that was done in 2015 that was not, obviously it was not updated, that showed like on the south and west side, only like 4 to 5% of the money from the TIFs had actually been spent on projects in those areas. So the bottom line is that it never delivered on its promise, and it was never used as it was designed to do. That does not mean that using TIFs to do infrastructure investments, and they designed a TIF to help with a lot of the CTA infrastructure, does not suggest those type of things are not sound, but they have not used TIF revenues to develop those long neglected areas of the city. And as a result, you've only really seen development in the city in about maybe 10 of the 50 wards. And in like 4 of the 50 wards, half the city's development has occurred. So you've got areas on the south side and west side that have been disinvested in. And you see it in the exodus of the middle class. In 1970, when I was in college, by the way, showing you my age, 50% of the city was middle income. WBEZ report came out and said today it's 15%. And when you take the mandatory city residence requirements it's probably in the single digits. So we've gone from half the city being middle class to barely a sixth of the city being middle class. And that is not a healthy situation. And since 2000, I think the number was, well, over 250,000 African-American, middle-income African-Americans have left the city. So the exodus is an exodus of largely middle-income and upper-income residents, which is destabilizing the communities because we've really become the tale of two cities. The majority of the city being very, very poor, and a section of the city being more affluent. And unfortunately, you're seeing the results of that disinvestment. There's been I call them the preconditions for violence in the community, and we just simply have not. We've simply failed to address those issues.